Okay, so movement, we have two different movement types. We have linear movement and we have spiral movement. So if this guy catches wind of their players, this is the enemy, this is our player. If our player walks into his range, there's two types. One that'll just attack him directly. That's not our player. That's not our enemy. He'll just attack him directly, and the other one will do something like this, right? So one spirals around the player, and the other one just goes straight for him. Those are two types of movement that should be triggered by the same thing called scouting. But we don't want to have to tie them all individually. So what we can do is use an abstract class similar to an interface, but the abstract class can be leveraged in Unity's inspector easily, and it can also use getComponent more easily, although getComponent on interfaces isn't too bad. But an abstract class essentially allows us to create this higher level version of our movement script and then inherit it or implement it down below. So here our movement basically has, because it's abstract, it won't actually call, I guess you could technically call update and whatnot, but we really just want to create an abstract method for start movement. Do I even need that? Abstract void. I do. I always forget how to handle these. Is it virtual void?
Virtual.
Goodness. Yeah. And it's public. It's public. I believe.
Now, why is the abstract not virtual?
It's virtual. You're right. I'm a dingus. Abstract would be if I'm actually writing.
Be able to override it, right?
Yeah. Because it is not marked abstract. Nope. It's abstract. Virtual is if it's. So virtual is if I wanted to find a body that would default to, and then I could override it. Abstract is there's no default functionality. You have to give me a functionality. So the idea there is, if I want it to be linear, then if I implement movement,
this has to have
correct.
It has to have functionality for start movement.
Or if I want to actually, I should probably just call this moving or move. Yeah, we'll call it start movement. The idea here is we just want an easy way for us to get into these classes. So start movement should trigger, if it's linear, I should start chasing at the target. Or maybe I should start chasing at the transform's position, because am I just chasing at them, and then if they get out of my way, I don't continue chasing at them? Who knows? But, spiral is a different way. But here, in my linear chasing, now, in my scouting class, I don't need to worry about all the different types of movement. Mm-hmm. I just have to know, hey,
that moves.
So let's do our movement. I just have a generic movement object, and then we'll do the proper way that you were talking about earlier is awake, and then movement equals getComponent movement. Even though it's an abstract class, so I'm not actually going to drag and drop movement onto any objects. So if my enemy has a type of movement we're going to call linear chasing, he doesn't have a movement script. There's no movement in any of these. It's just linear chasing. But because linear chasing is an abstract implementation, it's an implementation of the abstract class movement, this will get linear chasing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now, because we have that, we can debug.log movement just to make sure that that exists. And we get proof of that. But now we can call movement.move, start movement. And
then movement and say moving.
Correct.
Linear movement.
Under linear chasing, yeah. Probably should call it move. Although if this is chasing, let's actually give it a target too. So let's actually say in movement, we're going to say transform. And then in here, we have to actually implement transform. We'll do that. Call it that. And
just debug it, I guess.
Transform
move
target, and we want to actually say target equals. So if I want to start movement, I have a target, right? And then in my update,
you would move in the update.
Is it translate? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I guess I could just do rigid body .2D.
I don't know how the physics system movement works, really.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I could also just do something like this. I mean, if all movement objects are going to have rigid body 2D, RB2D, void awake, RB2D equals get component, rigid body 2D. The reason I'm doing this in the abstract class is that I can access it below. So if it's public, now in my linear chasing, I should have access to RB2D, which I do. And now I can say dot velocity equals target minus transform, target dot position minus transform dot position. Dot normalized times, I don't know, how fast do we move? Like 0.3f?
Oh, sure. Times time delta time or whatever, since it's an update, so you don't like progress.
Well, this is actually a fixed update. Because I'm updating velocity, it's not actually gonna matter for the time that delta time, because velocity will automatically change.
Pushing a force, right?
Yeah, actually, I think we should do update here. It doesn't really matter, to be honest.
Doesn't that continuously increase the velocity every?
I'm overriding the velocity.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not adding force. This is probably not best practice, to be honest. This is just showcase a use case. So here we have linear chasing. If something walks into my targeting, I start the movement through the scouting. Start movement with player.transform. And let's see what happens. I hope it functions. Man, that was a lot of code to write, and some pressure's on, my dude.
Surprised.
So now we move our player into.
It didn't break.
Hey, look at that! It's moving.
Look at that shit.
There's some null references issues, but I mean, you gotta have some issues, right? Where's my null reference?
It's working. What was the null reference?
Do I not have an? I do have.
Put a rigid body on your linear chasing script in the inspector.
Oh, I actually called. I don't need to put it there because I'm doing it in the abstract movement. I'm actually doing the get component. So I put the rigid body in the abstract class, so I don't have to do it in all my different movement classes because I'm trying to reduce the amount of duplicate code, right?
What was the? So what's the null reference?
I don't know. That's a good question. Let's figure it out. So rb2d.velocity debug.log rb2d debug.log. Well, actually, debug.log rb2d debug.log you know what? It's not actually an issue. I'm realizing this. It's only doing this because there's no target at the beginning. So if there's no target,
see, if no target, got it. Look at that.
Return. There's like 15 different ways to handle this, but really we're just saying, hey, if there's no target, get out of update. Don't do anything else. Can we do a null check like that? I can't remember. You can do that in JavaScript. I think so. We'll find out. We'll break shit. See what happens. Yeah, perfect. So that was all it was. That linear chasing is it debugging in here. So the scouting. So perfect. Now when we move the player in there, it starts chasing and he'll chase us around the map. If we wanted to do something else like spiral chasing, we would do the similar thing where we would just, instead of, where do we even have it here? We don't even have it open here. Spiral chasing, we'd inherit from movement again, or we'd implement movement. And scouting would scouting would work just the same. We don't need to modify scouting. We don't need to modify the movement script. The only difference, exactly.
Just the update. Yeah, this is.
So if you actually let's just copy all this in here and change how we handle it. So maybe not spiral chasing. You know what we're gonna do is we're actually going to. Spiral chasing sounds like complicated shit. We're gonna call it a dash. You following me?
Following you. Now here's a question. Is the start movement always going to be that?
What do you mean?
that function start movement,
Mm-hmm.
is it always just setting target to transform?
No, and that's what I'm actually doing right here is I'm creating a dash, and you'll understand what I mean in a second. So dash, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it go just straight at whatever the position was as soon as they caught the enemy, but they're not gonna continue to track. They're just gonna dash towards your position. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking the position of the transform at the moment that the movement started. But after that, done until they re-enter and re-exit. So target is actually vector, it's 0. So we're going to create a bool here and say acquired. And we're going to default it to false. Technically, we should be doing that in a start method, but don't at me. Acquired and say if not acquired. If we don't have a target acquired, return. Otherwise, target is now a vector 3. So rather than a transform, we're just going to target a generic position. And we're going to say, hey, our velocity is equal to that previous position normalized times 0.3. And if our target minus position, if the magnitude is less than 0.1, then we're going to stop moving. So if is less than 0. If that dot magnitude, basically we don't want to have this thing go circles around itself. It's less than 0.1 f, return. This is kind of how I do these. Like rather than making this long if structure with else's, I just do if and then return at the beginning and exit those no conditions first. It saves you some processing. And it also just looks cleaner in my opinion, but other people would disagree. So now let's try here. What'll happen is as soon as I find it, as soon as target's acquired, start movement happens. And what happens in start movement is it says, let's record the position of the thing that started the movement or the thing that triggered it. And let's say acquired equals true. And then an update, if acquired is equal to true, continue to, well, the velocity only needs to happen once. So why am I even doing this? This is the easiest thing to do. If I only need to set the velocity once, I don't even need to do any of this. Sorry, I'm like thinking out loud here and it's probably not helpful. It'll make sense in about 2 seconds. Basically, our enemy, we're going to change him from linear chasing to dash. And rigid body 2D. I don't even need to have this here. So let's go back to movement. It's public because I want it to be accessible down the line, but it doesn't. It's not. It's actually setting it on awake, so we don't need to set it in here. But regardless, let's just get into it. Go to the game. I'm hoping this works. He dashes towards me, but he dashes towards the position I was.
Yeah.
And now he dashes this way.
Dash.
He's real slow, but I mean, it gets the point across, right?
Yeah.
And so now if I were to pause the game and move this off and add linear chasing on, I don't know if it would work, but we can find out. Continue. Yeah, it wouldn't, because it needs to actually, it's having hiccups.
Did you just switch the movement style? Like
I literally just removed the component and added a different one. So we go back to linear chasing. And so that's kind of a way that we can leverage, and now it's actually chasing me properly. So depending on what components on that enemy will now drive the movement. But we didn't have to modify how they're scouting, and we didn't have to modify how the movement is triggered or started. We're literally just writing what's the logic for the actual start of movement and how we handle it. So at the very beginning, we get a target. How do we handle it? Do we continue to track that target and follow them around? Do we just take the position of the target as soon as we saw them and just go right at them? So in our dash, we probably would want it to be like 1.5F or something like that. It's an actual dash rather than a crawl. And then we move back to here. And so we can create one enemy. Why don't we just duplicate it and then give one enemy dash, the other one linear chasing. And there could be, what we could do is add some headers to say you can only have one type of movement script on an object, because right now if you had both of them on, they'd fight each other, right? But let's move.
Or I guess you could have a collection of different types of movement that it can select.
That would work too.
Yeah.
But now if we do this, one of them actually dashes at my original position, and the other one follows me around properly. And the only difference is they have different components attached to them. Only one different component, which is specifically driving the movement, and one of these is having issues.
Yeah, so you would do attack the exact same way.
Correct. Oh, this movement. Why?
And then so looking down the road at what I'm going to have to do with this. So let's say I want to before the enemy dashes, it's
They were
like
fighting each other.
dash path.
Sorry, say that one more time.
So like before it dashes, let's say it puts a line down of the path it's about to take.
Mm-hmm.
And
you
then
could do that in start movement.
And then I have like a can dash bull on there, so it will not be able to move again until it dashes. All of that movement will go in this inside dash.
Correct. So like you say, hey, let's define, the start and end position. So rather than just here, I mean, I've got a target position, but I could say, start, vector 3, start, vector 3, end, and then you could do like a translate, or you can do, what is it called? Is it interpolate? It's what is it called? It's where you interpolate between 2 points. Vector 3 dot interpolate. No, it's there's a function or a method. Lerp. Lerp. You could lerp between the two positions over a time frame. And now, of course, that's not going to have physics because you're going to be lerping over. You could do it on a rigid body and lerp the rigid body, and it would work with physics. But you have to be really careful with update versus fixed update and those cycles. But I'm not going to worry about those just yet. You'll find those out, I'm sure, eventually. But the whole idea behind that is if you wanted to change this to say, hey, as soon as I acquire a position, I have to complete my action before I start the next one, you would just record the start position of the dash and the end position, and you would lerp between the two, and while you're in the middle of your dash, you don't accept any start movement. You just essentially return. So if position, so transform.position is not equal to end, or you check if you're within 0.1 distance from your end, units from your end, then you would return. And so what you're saying here is, even though start movement can be called, even though I've re-triggered it, I haven't finished my original dash. But that's game logic at this point. That's not necessarily the architecture. Does that follow?
Yeah, I don't think that's not the way I was thinking about doing it, but that does the same thing.
And in reality, you can write the dash logic however you like. This is just
I was just wondering if it's all going to be everything for the dash. So the check if you can move, if I put an indicator down, all of that is going to be in dash.
Correct.
So if I have
now you could of course have you could have shared functionality, again, having an indicator of what direction you're moving.
Yeah, I probably want an indicator component that I could just attach to anything.
Exactly. Yeah, and then what I would do is if I would completely detach it from this movement abstract class, and I would just say, hey, I have a rigid body with a velocity. Let's just give an indicator with the velocity attached to it. And if there's more complicated indicators for each individual type of movement, maybe attach those indicators to those individual movements. But that's kind of I think that one is kind of a player's choice. There's not really a direction I can give you on that one.
Okay. Well,
I think this should cover most of it. I'm gonna just go ahead and grab this whole. I'll rename the scene to something that's actually a scene name. Let's call this the shape fighting.
Literally, yeah. For me, you can just literally just send me the scripts.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna just upload it to Git and then give you a link to it. So,
because if you're uploading it, you can do that. You can just send me the scripts because I'll just be implementing it into what I've already started.
Sure, sounds great. And then there's there's the other stuff that we talked about with like event actions and subscribing and making sure you're keeping your data separate from your controllers. But yeah, it'll all be there. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. But otherwise, good luck. And I look forward to seeing you finish a project, unlike me, where I get all the way through the complicated parts and I go, nah, good enough.
Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
I guess yeah, if you're down to help here and there, I'm going on vacation soon. I'll spend some time tomorrow probably because my whole office is basically going on vacation. I work from home. I have since the end of February because of the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I'll probably spend some time tomorrow refactoring and rewriting everything I have.
Sure.
And then if you would like to, at that point, I can share that project.
Hey, you can share it with me if you want. I probably won't jump in on writing much code for you, other than
No,
like
no,
these.
I just
But
to tell me like
like give
basically
you
like,
some. Hey, I don't. Why did you do this way? That kind of thing, like a code review. Yeah, sure.
yeah, just be like, okay, here you could have done this way, or
Yeah.
you know,
I want to try to stray away from saying I would have done it. I might say I would do it this way, but I wouldn't say the way you did it was wrong, because there's almost never a wrong way unless you're doing like egregious sins.
yeah,
It's just in reality with game dev, there's a lot of flexibility, especially with Unity, with the component-based design. You can shift yourself to like a pseudo ECS, or you can shift yourself straight to components only, or you could put everything in one script if you really wanted to. Please don't do that. That is one of the egregious sins. But I think you're past. You're not at that point right now.
no, that's. I mean, that was why I got like I know what I want. I was just trying to figure out a way to sort it with Unity because I understand it. The interface, I guess it was using abstract classes makes more. I mean, it's kind of doing what the interface does, but better for Unity, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
actually, I believe you
does the
probably could use an interface for some of that, but the problem with interfaces, that's I probably didn't touch on that at all. Is the problem with interfaces is you can't call native mono behavior functionality from an interface. You can't implement mono behavior from an
Yeah.
interface. So therefore, you can't do get component, and you can't reference this. If you're just gonna say, hey, you have to have this virtual void,
Mhm.
yeah, it wouldn't matter. But this is actually, I'm glad I did this now because it actually shows the value of having an abstract class. You can put actual game logic to be run in that abstract class and have it happen that way. And I believe, I don't think I have an awake here, but if I did a public awake void awake, I believe I have to, how do I call the
You have to,
parent
you have
one?
to override it,
Can I, oh yeah, override, you're right. Um,
and then does it have to be virtual to override
um,
or method dash?
I wonder if it'll call. I don't think it'll call both. I don't know if I have to call super. We're not going to talk about it because I don't remember and I don't want to confuse everybody. So we're just going to leave it at this. Isolate that and call it square. Actually, I wonder. Let's just do this. Let's just test this real quick.
Awake
Debug.log.
part of that class. It's part of mono behavior.
Well, and this inherits from mono behavior. So technically, I'm wondering if they both will call awake, or if one overrides the other.
Oh,
Movement. So if it says movement and dash.
I would expect that they both will call it.
Dash and movement, but there should be 3 here. So if I have in linear chasing void awake and I debug.log linear.
Yeah, so I guess what's happening there is because awake is part of mono behavior, you can't override it because it's not an abstract class.
So the abstract part of it is so I'm actually, because this is called here in movement, is it virtual void awake? No. Is it virtual? Public.
It can't be private.
And then I would do something like this. Override and then call parent. How do I call the parent? Hold on. Call parent abstract method in C#. Is it just base? Is it just base?
Just
Base.awake. Oh, okay. Well,
yes, that's simple, I guess.
maybe it doesn't even need to be overridden. I don't. It might not have to be.
Now, can you use like the colon base at the end of that instead of, you know what I'm saying?
Can I do like? What do you mean?
Instead of say private void awake parentheses colon base, can you just do it that way and then just
Private
call it
awake. Like this.
after the yeah?
Do I need to do?
I thought you could do something like that.
You might be right. I just can't remember. I'm looking it up to see if there's anywhere else that shows it. And we're gonna take a step back here, and new. I don't remember if new actually overrides it or not. It shouldn't. Yeah, okay, great. So this will actually call the base.awake, and this will create a new version of awake for the local version. So now if I do new, I call base.awake. Now it'll call the awake for both the original one and this one. So that was kind of like a live figuring it out, but yes, you can have awake in both your original abstract class and your child classes. But there's not really anything happening in these child ones other than the debug logs, so we probably should just get rid of them. But we'll leave them there, and we'll do the debug.log dash just for... Got real fancy, threw an E on the end there.
Yeah, dash A.
Just for learning's sake. All right. Okay, I'm gonna call that. We're gonna call that good. I got work in the morning. It's already the morning, so I got work soon.
Yeah, you're doing better than me. Cause I'm an hour ahead of you.
Jeez. Well, that's not good.
Yeah, well, this is normal. So.
Well, at least you don't have to drive, right? You don't have a commute.
Yeah, that is a positive. Plus, my boss just went out of on vacation, and we canceled our meeting tomorrow morning. So, I will probably sleep my ass in.
So there you go. All right. Well, have a good night. I'm gonna go ahead and commit this all to a Git before I go to sleep, and then shoot you a link.
Yeah, okay, and I will do my best to go to sleep before I see the link, so I don't.
Okay. I'll do it real
hours.
slow so you don't feel like you have to wait for anything. Talk to you later.
All right, man.
See you later.